Training session. Understanding the disconnect in income class perception. Now welcome and set the tone. Hello everyone. I'm Ravi, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to our training session today. We're going to explore an important topic that affects many individuals and families: the perception of income class and the disconnect between outdated governmental metrics and the current financial realities of living costs. By the end of this session, you will understand the historical context of the poverty line, recognize how modern living costs challenge traditional income classifications, identify the implications of these disconnects on real-life financial situations. Present step-by-step. Step 1. Historical context of the poverty line. Let's start with the origins of the poverty line. It was established by Molly Orshansky in the 1960s, based on the assumption that food was the largest expense for families. Originally, the poverty line was set around $31,000, determined by multiplying the cost of a minimum food diet by 3. Step 2. The expense flip. Fast forward to today. Food now accounts for only about 5–7% of a household budget. Essential expenses like housing, healthcare, childcare, and taxes have surged. For instance, many families now spend a significant portion of their income on rent or mortgage, far surpassing food costs. Step 3. The modern calculation. If we were to update the poverty line using modern spending ratios, we would see a dramatic increase. For a single person, it could rise to approximately $72,000. For a family of 4, the income needed to meet basic needs could be around $140,000 annually when essential costs like childcare are included. Simplify and clarify. To put this into perspective, think about your own financial situation. How much do you spend on housing and healthcare compared to food? By understanding these shifts, we can see why many people classified as middle class or even wealthy may actually be struggling to meet their basic needs. Encourage active participation. Now, I'd love to hear from you. What are some of the biggest financial challenges you face? How do you feel about the term middle class in today's economy? Feel free to share your thoughts and experiences. Your input.
All right, let's dive in. Today, we're going to talk about something that affects all of us: money, justice, and some seriously game-changing tech. And it all starts with just one single number: $140,000. What pops into your head when you see that? Maybe a fancy sports car or, a down payment on a house somewhere? But what if I told you that according to one analysis that went viral, this is actually the new poverty line for a family of 4 in America? Yeah, shocking, right? But it kicks off a really important conversation about the gap between the official stats and what it actually feels like to live day to day. And this is where it gets really wild. On one side, you've got the official government poverty line sitting at around $31,000. But on the other side, this recalculated version says a family needs more like 140 grand just to make ends meet. So what gives? How can the numbers be that different? Well, believe it or not, it all comes down to a formula from way back in the 1960s. See, back then, the biggest chunk of a family's budget was food, about a third of it. So the government just took the cost of groceries and multiplied it by 3. Simple. The thing is, today, costs like housing, healthcare, and childcare have absolutely exploded. But that basic formula, it never really got an update. And that's not just a math problem. It's a blind spot that changes how we even talk about money and struggle. So many of us feel this pressure, right? This sense that the numbers just don't line up with reality. But here's a thought. Maybe the problem isn't just some dusty old formula. What if it's actually part of a much bigger, more complex system that's working in the background, one we don't even see? And that leads us to this really provocative idea from a platform called Court Bank. They basically argue that we need to start looking at our court systems not just as places of justice, but as massive financial machines. So here's the core idea. Then it's a big one. Justice isn't just blind, it's a business. Every time a document is filed or a judge makes a ruling, It creates a financial instrument. From this point of view, court judgments themselves can be packaged up and traded, almost like stocks. The whole system is funded by a constant flow of money from things like bonds, fines, and all sorts of fees. And we're not talking about small change here. The material from Court Bank estimates that something like $100 billion flows through the American court system every single year. That just shows you the incredible scale of the financial engine they're talking about. Okay, so let's recap for a second. We've got this huge gap between the official story and real life, and we've got this new way of seeing the justice system as a financial powerhouse. When things get this complex, it's no surprise that people are turning to new tech, not just to understand what's going on, but to actually try and change the rules of the game. And the technology at the center of all this, it's blockchain. Now, the simplest way to think about it is like a digital record book that's shared by everyone. It's secure, it's transparent, and because no single person or company owns it, it's almost impossible to cheat or change the records. This one piece of tech is the building block for two very, very different ideas for how to move forward. So the first way people are using this tech, let's call it radical knowledge. The idea is pretty simple, actually. You can't change a system until you truly understand how it works. It's all about empowering people from the outside. And the Court Bank platform is all about this. Their whole learning process is designed to give you that power. First up, you connect your digital wallet. That's kind of like your ID card for this world. Then you get access to all these deep dive study materials. Once you've gone through it, you take some pretty tough tests to show you know your stuff. And if you pass, you get a credential that's permanently recorded on the blockchain. And what you get is something called a soul-bound token. Now think of it like this. It's a digital diploma, but one you can never, ever sell or give away. It's permanently locked to your digital identity. It's undeniable proof of what you know, and here's the key part, you own it, not the school that gave it to you. All right, now let's pivot to the second approach, which is totally different. We'll call this one radical efficiency. This path isn't about teaching everybody how the system works so they can challenge it. Nope. It's about using that same blockchain tech to build better tools for the people already working inside the system to make it faster, cheaper, and way more secure. And a perfect example of this is a platform called the JusticeFund Exchange. It's built for legal pros who handle really complex financial cases. It takes this old, slow, paper-heavy process and completely digitizes it. It starts with rock-solid identity verification, so there's no fraud. Then, when claims are filed, the system automatically checks for errors. From there, smart contracts take over, processing everything automatically. And the best part? Everyone involved can see exactly where things stand in real time. And the results? Well, they're pretty staggering. We're talking about a 73% cut in the time it takes to settle a case, an 89% drop in errors, and 42% lower admin costs. It's basically taking a system that runs on paper and patience and turning it into a high-speed digital operation. You know, this whole drive for efficiency isn't just happening in the legal world. It's part of a much bigger trend. You see platforms like Secure Bank Box using this exact same kind of technology, blockchain and tokenization, to make things like international finance and logistics run smoother and more securely. It just goes to show you how this inside-out strategy is being used everywhere to upgrade old systems. So when you put it all together, you've got these two totally different ways of tackling the problem, even though they're both using the exact same technology. Courtbank's radical knowledge path is about teaching the public to create pressure from the outside. Meanwhile, Justice Fund's radical efficiency path is about giving insiders better tools to fix the system from the inside. All right, we have covered a ton of ground here, from economic numbers that don't feel right to the idea of courts as banks and the technologies trying to shake it all up. So what's the big takeaway here? It really leaves us with this incredible picture, right? On one hand, you have an economy where the official numbers say one thing, but people's bank accounts say another. Then you have this idea of a hidden financial world operating within our justice system. And finally, you've got this powerful new tech, blockchain, carving out two completely different roads into the future. And all of this really boils down to one huge question. When we take these amazing new technologies and apply them to these old, complicated systems, are we actually fixing what's broken? Or are we just building a faster, more efficient version of a flawed machine? That's the real tension here, and it's definitely something worth thinking about.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are undertaking a really fascinating sort of dual investigation into the financial world. It's a world defined by, incredible complexities, staggering sums of money, and a lot of the time, almost total opacity. We've pulled two threads that at first glance seem completely disconnected, but they actually share this really profound relationship. The systems we build to handle money and the antiquated ways we measure our own survival. So, on one hand, we're looking into the world of ultra high finance, really sophisticated legal systems, and this cutting edge, decentralized technology that's designed to secure billions in commercial instruments.
Right.
But on the other hand, we're examining the most foundational financial reality of American life, the minimum cost of simply surviving. And here's the hook, and it's a provocative one for you to consider. What if the official government poverty line for a family of four, a number most of us have heard is around, $31,000, was fundamentally logically wrong?
Completely wrong.
And what if the real financial threshold you need just to keep a modest family afloat in today's economy was closer to, say, $140,000 a year?
That staggering contrast, the gulf between those two figures is exactly what our source material is forcing us to grapple with today. You have this massive, constantly innovating financial infrastructure running the legal system, a system that, as you said, relies on military-grade security and blockchain immutability. And yet the actual metrics we use to measure the financial health of the average household are stuck in a time capsule. They're using formulas that were created when, the Beatles were still top in the charts.
And that's exactly our mission for this deep dive. We're doing this dual analysis. So first, we are unpacking the system itself. We're diving into how the judicial and commercial landscapes function as these massive financial entities. And we'll look at how platforms like JusticeFund Exchange or JFE and Secure Bank Box are using decentralized tech to modernize, to secure, and really accelerate these high-value legal and financial instruments.
And then second, we're going to perform what is, I think, a necessary recalibration of reality. We're going to deconstruct the powerful arguments and the surprisingly simple, but I think undeniable math behind why traditional economic metrics, especially that outdated government poverty line, completely fail to reflect the intense economic pressure that is felt by nearly every American household today.
Yeah, and our sources for this are just wildly diverse and compelling. We're synthesizing complex white papers on decentralized finance architecture, these deep dive exposés from organizations like Court Bank on the systematic monetization of justice.
And viral, but really meticulously calculated economic analysis that directly challenges the foundational metrics we've all just sort of taken for granted for decades.
Exactly. We promise this is going to be a very illuminating and maybe even a frustrating conversation. Okay, so let's unpack this core premise because it fundamentally shifts how you view the entire legal system. Before we can even look at modern solutions, we have to establish the sheer complexity of the existing system. The Court Bank research we looked at makes an absolutely critical revelation.
A huge one.
Which is that the governmental judicial system operates not just as an impartial arbiter of disputes, but in parallel as a massive, sophisticated financial entity.
And what's truly fascinating here is when you trace the historical context. The Court Bank research synthesizes over 200 years of data. They're looking at legal precedents, legislative acts, rulings, financial records, all to document the systematic monetization of justice across, diverse global jurisdictions.
And where does it start?
They trace the beginnings of this interwoven financial judicial system right back to the landmark 1789 Judiciary Act in the U.S. That act established the architecture for federal courts, and crucially, it began defining how those courts would handle property and debt and claims.
So if you approach the law through that lens, it fundamentally changes how you view a legal proceeding, whether it's civil or criminal. It's not just about resolving a dispute or, assigning punishment. The analysis delves into the foundational understanding of the contractual nature of virtually all legal proceedings. From the moment you file an initial complaint, which is essentially initiating a claim against a counterparty, all the way to the final judgment.
That's the key, the contractual nature. Every single action initiates a process that can lead to the creation or the transfer or the monetization of a financial instrument. And the big shift that really facilitated this massive monetization was the move away from pure common law principles,
which are based on tradition and precedent.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Away from that and toward these formal written commercial code frameworks. This codification essentially legalized the deep integration of judicial processes with with commercial banking practices. It allowed legal outcomes to be easily standardized, valued, and then traded.
So when a court issues a monetary judgment, that piece of paper isn't just an order to pay, it's a financial asset.
Precisely. We really need to look at the mechanics of this monetization. Legal processes don't just consume money through fees, they actively generate financial instruments. Court judgments, for instance, are rapidly converted into securitized assets.
Like mortgages.
Very much like mortgages or other types of debt. They could then be bundled, rated, and traded on financial markets. This is how the system actually moves capital.
And tracing that capital flow, I mean, that really reveals the scale of the whole operation. This money moves through these elaborate bond systems, pervasive fee structures, and the rigorous enforcement and collection of fines, which then often feed right back into municipal or state budgets.
Yeah, and when you trace that flow using the data visualizations that CourtBank highlights, the numbers are just absolutely staggering. We are talking about approximately $100 billion annually, circulating through American courts alone. And this encompasses everything: civil judgments, criminal fines, routine court fees, the billions tied up in bail bonds. And CourtBank shows similar proportional figures across other developed nations, revealing this consistent global pattern where the judiciary operates as a self-sustaining financial engine.
And the systemic overlap is so critical for understanding why you'd even need platforms like JFE. The CourtBank curriculum highlights these intricate, often opaque connections between judicial operations and the broader financial regulatory framework.
We're talking about things like the commercial banking regulations and how they intersect directly with court rules and administrative operations.
For example,
Well, they explore specific, often hidden legal mechanisms. One is the historical evolution of admiralty law, which, was originally designed for maritime disputes, contracts, cargo, shipping, all that.
right, and the high seas.
Exactly. But it transitioned into a framework for broader commercial transactions involving things like bills of lading and international debt. And its influence still shapes how modern commercial courts handle issues of jurisdiction and secured assets.
And then there's trust law. That has to be fundamental because in so many judgments or settlements, the court or an appointed official is acting as a trustee, holding or administering funds on behalf of a claimant or a beneficiary. This means the court system is constantly engaged in these really high stakes fiduciary activities, moving and securing massive sums of money that come from litigation.
Exactly. And the judicial financial dependencies are often hidden within the administrative budgets. The research shows how court budgets, salaries, operational funding, it can all be directly linked to financial markets and banking institutions, often through the investment or the handling of these funds and fees.
Which makes it totally clear why modern legal and commercial transactions require equally sophisticated financial security and transparency.
It's a necessity.
And this complexity is exactly what CourtBank is trying to demystify with its educational resources, which, and I love this part, themselves use cutting-edge decentralized technology to verify expertise.
Yes, their educational model it's highly innovative because they're solving this paradox of professional verification in a decentralized world. So upon successful completion of their core curriculum, which details all the financial and legal intersections we just discussed, participants earn blockchain verified certificates.
So these are non-transferable digital credentials.
Permanently recording knowledge and complex competency achievement.
And they specifically use soul-bound tokens, or SBTs. For our listeners who might not be deep into the blockchain mechanics, you can think of an SBT as a digital badge that is prominently tied to a single wallet, like a digital identity.
It's locked.
It cannot be transferred or sold, which makes it an immutable record of your achievement.
And they deploy these SBTs on multiple leading chains like Ethereum, Polygon, and Solana, and they use the ERC 1155 standard. This multi-chain approach is crucial because it ensures the verification is platform agnostic and truly decentralized. No single entity can revoke or modify the achievement.
Okay, but what about privacy? That seems paramount in legal education and professional credentialing.
It is. And for that, they incorporate advanced zero-knowledge proofs, or ZKPs.
ZKPs, a brilliant cryptographic tool.
They really are. They allow the credential holder to prove they possess a certain piece of information. For example, that they completed the CourtBank modules on UCC Article 9 compliance without ever revealing their entire educational record or their identity to the verifier.
So it preserves privacy while still enabling this really granular verification for, say, potential partners, employers, or other institutions.
Right. And beyond just the education, Advanced achievements unlock these specialized decentralized autonomous organizations, or DAOs, which are focused on legal research.
So this is where the governance element comes in.
Exactly. By holding the verified certificate, the legal community gains governance voting rights on critical decisions. This means the people who actually understand the financialization of justice are the ones shaping the future of decentralized legal research, or curriculum development, or strategic research initiatives.
So they are building both the knowledge base and the governance tools needed for reform at the same time.
Simultaneously, embedding transparency and accountability directly into the education and research process itself.
Okay, so the knowledge cap identified by Court Bank and the sheer volume of capital we just talked about, $100 billion circulating through these opaque, often incredibly slow systems, that brings us directly to the solution space.
It has to.
If the court system is handling billions in complex, paper-based, high-risk financial transactions, judgments, bills of exchange, secured transactions, there is an absolute critical need for security, verifiable compliance, and an efficiency that the old system just cannot deliver.
That gap between the technological capability and the legacy infrastructure is exactly where JusticeFund Exchange, or JFE, steps in. It's a transformative platform designed to tackle the inherent risks of managing these high-value legal and financial instruments.
So JFE redefines the way digital judgment fund claims, bills of exchange, and secured transactions are processed, verified, and settled.
Right. It moves fiduciary operations, which are typically slow, reliant on manual paper checks, and just prone to high risk, into these seamless, regulatory compliant digital workflows.
Yeah.
JFE provides an end-to-end digital process,
Which ensures maximum efficiency and compliance for everyone involved. The legal professionals, the trustees, and the financial institutions that facilitate the ultimate payouts.
and the underlying engine is Notary Chain. JFE uses blockchain technology, smart contracts, and decentralized notarization to automate, authenticate, and secure these legal and commercial instruments. And this isn't just about speed, it's about generating immutable blockchain-based audit trails and ensuring compliance through what they call smart notarization.
You know, what strikes me is how skillfully JFE bridges the decentralized world with the established traditional legal framework. They heavily leverage tokenization while adhering meticulously to the principles that are embedded in the Uniform Commercial Code, the UCC.
And the UCC is the bedrock of commercial transactions in the U.S. It governs everything from sales contracts to bank deposits.
So that integration is absolutely critical for legal validity.
It is. The platform uses tokenization representing claims, trust assets, digital obligations as digital tokens on the blockchain to manage these assets with enhanced transparency and efficiency. But the UCC integration is, as you said, the critical part.
So let's take UCC Article 9, for instance. Can you break that down?
Sure. Article 9 governed secured transactions. So that means it dictates how a lender or a creditor can establish a legal claim, a security interest over a borrower's assets, ensuring they get paid if the borrower defaults.
Yeah.
JFE uses this platform to facilitate the ability to secure tax credits under UCC Article 9.
That's fascinating. So how does securing a tax credit work in this kind of digital context?
Well, a tax credit often represents a significant future financial asset. It's a right to reduce future tax liability, and is frequently used in corporate finance or complex litigation settlements.
Okay.
JFE tokenizes the document representing that tax credit, and then using smart contracts linked to the token, it creates a verifiable, time-stamped, and globally recognized security interest over that digitized asset, registering it according to UCC rules.
And that makes the tax credit a highly secure, tradable financial instrument, something that before was just, paper heavy and high risk.
Exactly.
So let's look at the specific capabilities JFE provides for these complex legal and financial workflows going beyond just tax credits. They have the ability to digitize complex legal documents like affidavits of obligation,
And provide irrefutable on-chain proof of that obligation's existence and its validity.
and that level of digitization empowers all the stakeholders: claimants who need to prove their entitlement, trustees who have to manage funds responsibly,
Notaries who authenticate documents, financial institutions who need assurance of asset quality. They can now all handle these high-value transactions with verifiable proof of funds and just seamlessly navigate complex regulatory landscapes. And their system supports advanced verification methods like qualified electronic signatures that meet international legal standards like IADAs.
The operational metrics really demonstrate the failure of the legacy system to keep up. I mean, JFE reports reducing processing time by up to 70%.
Think about what that means.
Yeah, in a legal context, months of waiting can be reduced to weeks or maybe even days. It minimizes human error and provides these comprehensive, indisputable audit trails for all fiduciary transactions.
And we have to emphasize their proven scale. They've processed over 10,000 successful settlements, totaling more than $2.7 billion in disbursed funds.
That's a huge number.
It is. And this impressive volume was achieved with an average processing time that was 47% faster than traditional centralized methods. And on top of that, their proprietary verification algorithms have achieved a 99.98% accuracy rate with zero reported security breaches since inception.
And when you're dealing with billions of dollars in trust, that kind of accuracy is not a luxury. It's an absolute necessity.
Absolutely.
That level of efficiency is only possible with, I assume, military-grade security and compliance features underpinning the whole system, especially when dealing with fiduciary funds.
Oh, for sure. The security infrastructure is bank grade. We're talking about military grade multi-factor authentication, including advanced biometric verification options, fingerprint, facial recognition, voice pattern analysis,
Wow.
with login success rates exceeding 99.8% for legitimate users. They also employ this intelligent anomaly detection that monitors over 50 user behavior patterns in real time. So if a user suddenly logs in from an unusual location and tries to initiate a large transfer, the system immediately flags it and locks the transaction.
And the data itself, I'm guessing it's protected with end-to-end 256-bit AES encryption.
For data both in transit and at rest, the same high standard used by major financial institutions worldwide. The immutability of the blockchain ensures that the audit trails can't be altered or deleted, preserving every transaction and modification for regulatory purposes for up to 15 years.
The compliance engine must be its most complex feature.
It probably is. It continuously updates itself to reflect changing legal frameworks across jurisdictions, and it delivers bi-weekly compliance patches. This engine automatically generates all the necessary documentation for regulatory bodies like the SEC, FINRA, the FTC, you name it.
Which must save a ton of time.
It reduces compliance preparation time by a staggering 85% compared to manual processes. They even maintain compliance certifications like SSAE 18 SOC2 Type 2, which is the gold standard for how well a company handles customer data and fiduciary responsibilities.
So beyond the security, they also solve that final practical hurdle, moving the money quickly and compliantly. And they do that with a sophisticated treasury routing system.
This is a remarkable feat of algorithmic engineering. This system determines the optimal fund routing paths based on over 15 different variables. Things like the claim type, the transaction amount, the regulatory status of the counterparty, and the jurisdictional requirements for settlement.
So it's not just finding the fastest path, it's finding the most efficient, secure, and cost-effective one, while incorporating compliance requirements from all 50 states plus federal regulations.
Yes. They handle over $1.2 billion in annual transaction volume, with a remarkable 99.997% accuracy rate for these complex routings. It cuts the average settlement time by 73% compared to traditional, often manual correspondent banking processes.
It's just clear that JFE is setting a new decentralized standard for digital commercial and legal workflows. But this ecosystem of security and decentralization, it's expanded by related platforms, right? Like Secure Bank Box.
Right. Secure Bank Box plays a critical complementary role. So while JFE focuses really tightly on legal claims and secured transactions, Secure Bank Box provides secure and decentralized solutions across the broader financial and logistics industries.
And it leverages the same foundational technologies.
The same ones: blockchain, smart contracts, and data tokenization to mitigate risks and streamline complex cross-border transactions, even during major disruptions like supply chain issues or banking failures.
So we're talking about expanding the utility into things like complex commercial banking tasks, trust administration, and even facilitating arbitration during legal conflicts.
Precisely. Their system's ability to tokenize financial assets offers financial institutions and logistics companies new opportunities for risk mitigation and transparency in high-volume global transactions. Secure Bank Box empowers participants with enhanced security, privacy, and compliance in today's digital banking landscape.
It's just incredible that court finance, which touches millions of people and billions of dollars annually, requires 256-bit encryption, ZKPs, and SOC2 Type 2 compliance just to function securely.
Yeah.
It really makes you wonder what kind of security the government is using to track something as simple and as fundamental as the poverty line.
That is the perfect segue. We've just seen how high finance manages billions using military-grade decentralized technology. The irony is that the metrics we use to measure the financial survival of the average family haven't received a meaningful update since the Vietnam War.
So let's pivot to the $140,000 question.
Let's do it.
This transition from tracking securitized tax credits to tracking the minimum cost of a family's food budget is it's jarring, but it's necessary because it highlights the vast disconnect between systemic financial innovation and just stagnated social metrics.
It really does.
So the core of this argument, which was popularized by Michael Green, is that the government's official poverty line for a family of four, around $31,000, is wildly inaccurate. Applying the original logical framework of the formula to modern expenses reveals a new poverty line that is closer to $140,000 a year.
And to understand how we got to that shocking disconnect, we have to go back to the original formula. It was created by an economist named Molly Orshansky in the 1960s. And the assumptions were simple, they were practical, and they made sense for that era.
Right.
The primary consumption unit was a family of four, and the core belief was that food was, by far, the biggest and most predictable part of their budget.
And the mechanism was the multiplier. Since food represented approximately 33%, or exactly 1/3, of a family's entire budget, the total necessary budget, the poverty line, was calculated simply as the minimum cost of a nutritious food plan multiplied by 3.
So if a family needed $1,000 a year for food, their poverty line was $3,000. It was a straightforward, easily tracked metric.
And that formula worked perfectly in the 1960s. And why? Because the core costs were totally different. One parent's income was often sufficient to support 4 people. Healthcare was cheap or covered.
Childcare wasn't really a required expense because one adult typically stayed home. Housing was relatively stable and low cost compared to income. Food was, in fact, the expense you had the most control over.
But the economy has completely flipped since then. And this is the crucial point that renders the Orshansky metric obsolete. Today, food is one of the smallest expenses for a working family. It represents maybe 5 to 7% of the total budget.
Right.
Meanwhile, housing, healthcare premiums, childcare, transportation, servicing debt, and taxes have all just exploded, taking up a disproportionately larger and often mandatory share.
And the government never updated the categories of essential spending. They never added housing or healthcare or childcare as key inputs. Instead, they just froze the core assumptions in time and adjusted the original $3,000 poverty line figure for inflation every year.
And that's how we get the current number of around $31,000 today. It's an antique formula updated by a modern multiplier.
I imagine just hearing that number, 31,000 for a family of 4 today, must feel like a cruel joke to listeners who are struggling to pay rent or insurance premiums.
It has to. That disconnect is the entire point. When Molly Orshansky created the formula, she could never have foreseen that a basic trip to the emergency room or a year of childcare for one toddler would consume an entire year of that official poverty line figure.
And the failure to update the formula categories created this illusion that poverty has barely grown over the last 50 years, which gives the government a politically convenient veneer of success.
So if this metric has been demonstrably wrong for decades, why didn't they fix it? I mean, economists across the political spectrum have been calling the poverty line inaccurate and outdated since the 1970s.
The reason, at the end of the day, is political toxicity and, frankly, fiscal responsibility. If you update the poverty line to accurately reflect the modern economic reality where housing and healthcare dominate budgets, you would instantly classify millions more working people as poor on paper overnight.
And if millions of people suddenly jump onto the official poor roster,
then the government has a legal and a moral obligation to respond.
exactly, the government would be legally obligated to pay more assistance, expand welfare programs, increase funding for school lunches and housing aid, and critically acknowledge a very significant and deepening national economic crisis that spans far beyond the traditionally defined poor.
And the attempts to update the formula in the 70s, the 80s, the 2000s, they all failed because the resulting required spend was simply too high for the political appetite.
But let me play devil's advocate for a second. If the government does update the line to 140,000, wouldn't that instantly classify many people who are currently receiving no aid as poor, and therefore increase the tax burden on the middle class to fund these expanded programs? Isn't that a valid political objection?
That is precisely the core political tension that has maintained the stagnation. If the government admits the true cost of survival is 140,000, they face 3 unpalatable choices: dramatically increase taxes, slash other budget areas to fund the new poverty programs, or simply redefine poverty benefits to be meaningless.
So it's much easier politically to maintain an outdated formula?
Way easier. It keeps the official poor roster small rather than admitting the scale of financial pressure facing the average working household. The formula is a tool of fiscal containment, not a mirror of reality.
Okay, let's break down the math behind Green's argument and how we move from 31,000 to 140,000. He uses two clear logical steps to demonstrate the absurdity of the $31,000 figure and arrive at the modern threshold. And method one is the ratio update,
Right.
applying the original Orshansky logic to today's spending ratios.
And this is where we need to be very patient because the math is a little counterintuitive. If you stick rigidly to the original logic minimum cost of the essential thing divided by the share of the budget it represents, the multiplier jumps wildly because the denominator, food's share, has shrunk so much.
Wait, if I spend less on food, why does the multiplier get bigger? It feels like it should get smaller.
Think of your budget like a fixed pie chart. In the 1960s, food was a generous third of the pie, right? So you multiplied the cost of that third by 3 to get the whole pie.
Okay.
Today, food is maybe just 6% of the pie. The cost of food may have stayed stable relative to other costs, but the other 94% rent, healthcare, childcare has exploded. So if food is just 1/16 of the pie, you have to multiply the minimum cost of food by 16 to estimate the total cost of the rest of the world.
That clarifies the link. So the money we saved on food has been immediately consumed by rent and premiums, which are mandatory.
Correct. The original formula became meaningless the moment housing and healthcare became mandatory, disproportionately large expenses.
Okay, let's use the easier analogy then. Substituting food with today's single largest essential expense. And for most people, that's going to be rent or a mortgage, which often consumes at least a third of the budget, just like food did in the 60s.
So we just apply the original 1960s multiplier of 3 to the modern essential. If the conservative national average rent or housing cost for a family of 4 is, say, $2,000 a month, that's $24,000 a year.
Right.
Multiply that $24,000 by 3, and you immediately get a poverty line of $72,000 a year.
And that right there is the easiest way to prove the $31,000 figure is just wrong. If you are paying $24,000 a year in rent and making less than $72,000, you are mathematically running out of money for other necessities very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But $72,000 is still only half of the claimed $140,000 figure. So where does the rest come from?
That brings us to method 2, the modern additive approach. Instead of relying on shrinking ratios that are hard to visualize, we just add up the conservative, unavoidable costs for a family of 4 in the modern economy. This is a common sense budgeting exercise, not some complex economic model.
And the key here is the distinction between survival and comfort. This calculation excludes all luxuries. No high-end phones, no vacations, no daily specialty coffees, no savings for college. This is just of the minimum money needed to maintain physical and legal stability.
Exactly. Let's break down those conservative national averages. We need to define modest housing. We'll stick with that $2,000 a month for rent, so $24,000 a year.
Okay.
Then basic healthcare. Even with employer-provided insurance, the premiums, deductibles, copays for a family of 4 can conservatively run $8,000 to $12,000 a year. We'll take the middle ground at $10,000.
Transportation, gas, maintenance, insurance for a basic car, another $8,000 to $10,000.
Food and utilities, even frugally managed, add another $12,000.
And then the unique modern constraint that just blows up the budget, the childcare trigger.
This is non-negotiable for the analysis. The original formula assumed one parent stayed home. But if the family must have 2 earners to afford that $24,000 rent, they immediately trigger a massive mandatory annual childcare bill.
Right.
Conservatively, even a low-cost full-time childcare arrangement for 2 children can easily cost $15,000 to $20,000 a year. And in high-cost metro areas, it can climb up to $32,000. Let's use a very conservative $18,000 average.
So the second worker isn't even working to get ahead. They are essentially working solely to pay the person watching the kids so they can go to work, plus transportation costs. It's a mandatory cost of employment in the modern economy.
So let's tally up these conservative essentials. Housing is $24K. Healthcare is $10K. Transportation is $9K. Food and utilities, $12K. Childcare, $18K. We are already at $73,000 before taxes or debt servicing like student loans and credit cards or clothing or any emergencies.
And if you add a buffer for necessary debt, some minimal emergency savings, and just basic life essentials that aren't food, housing, or healthcare, the required net income needed just to survive comfortably lands somewhere around $118,000.
And now we just reverse engineer the taxes. To clear $118,000 net, you have to account for federal income tax, state income tax, which varies widely, so we use a conservative average,
And FICA taxes.
and FICA, Social Security, and Medicare, which is about 7.65% right off the top. After you factor in roughly $18,000 to $22,000 in mandatory withholdings, the required gross income lands right around $136,000 to $140,000 a year.
That is the modern calculated equivalent of the too little threshold just to keep a family of 4 afloat in 2024.
Huh.
And when you realize the median household income in the US is only about $80,000 a year, which already often requires 2 earners,
Yeah.
it explains why so many people feel like they are constantly struggling, even if they're well above the official $31,000 poverty line.
And this leads directly to the macro-micro disconnect, why official economic metrics just feel wrong. You hear officials say unemployment is low, inflation is cooling, GDP is growing, everything is fine.
But that positive narrative doesn't align with people's lived experience because full employment does not translate to financial security when wages have not kept pace with core costs. People are working, sometimes multiple jobs, and still struggling to make that $140,000 survival threshold.
And we need to be really clear about inflation. Slowing inflation just means prices aren't going up as fast as they used to. It doesn't erase the massive sticky price increases in rent, healthcare, and groceries that have already occurred over the last 4 years.
So when the government declares inflation is under control, the average person looks at their rent renewal or their grocery receipt and feels they are still financially worse off than they were 5 years ago.
Exactly. And the GDP metric is another great example of this misdirection. GDP growth is often artificial. It's fueled by corporations circulating money, massive stock buybacks or tech stocks going up. But this expansion of wealth at the very top doesn't reflect whether the average family can afford a house, pay for childcare, or save money.
The micro reality of the household budget feels infinitely worse than the macro numbers suggest.
This brings us to the income perception reality check that's derived from our sources on income classes. The traditional labels, poor, middle, upper, they completely obscure the reality. The analysis suggests that people earning between, say, $53,000 and $116,000 are labeled middle class, but they're often categorized as being in the upper poor class.
Constantly burdened by massive financial obligations and striving to maintain a standard of living that feels increasingly out of reach. They're drowning in debt just to stay middle class.
And those making between $116,000 up to $373,000 are often viewed as the upper class, yet they are described as merely surviving, while dealing with the increasing costs of a comfortable but not truly wealthy lifestyle.
The labels just don't match the modern financial requirements.
Not at all. The financial stress and insecurity, driven by the real $140,000 cost of survival, spans across almost all income brackets below the truly wealthy. The takeaway is clear. The system is using the wrong inputs. If the economy evolves, but the formula used to measure survival doesn't, then all the subsequent metrics, the poverty line, the definition of middle class, even unemployment figures, fail to accurately describe the true cost of life in 2024. Hashtag tag outro.
We have covered 2 wildly different, but I think fundamentally linked concepts today: the financial structure of the legal system and the financial survival of the American family. On one side, we saw the incredible financial complexity of the judicial system operating as this massive commercial entity handling over $100 billion in annual transactions.
Right.
This volume requires cutting-edge, blockchain-backed solutions like JusticeFund exchange to manage secured transactions, judgments, and UCC compliance with military-grade security and, 99.997% accuracy.
And on the other side, we saw how the metrics used to measure the survival of the average household have entirely stagnated. While high finance leverages, tokenized assets, and zero-knowledge proofs, the poverty line remains rooted in a 1960s formula. It fails to account for the dominance of housing, healthcare, and childcare costs.
And this calculation reveals a real survival threshold closer to $140,000, not the official $31,000.
A huge difference.
The goal of analyzing the $140,000 figure is not to depress you, but to highlight that the system is using the wrong inputs. We can see systems like JFE are evolving rapidly, integrating decentralized technology to deliver transparency and accountability in high finance. But the metrics used to measure the average person's financial health have just stalled, creating this massive societal disconnect.
The micro reality of your household budget is far more complex than the macro numbers suggest. But, as you pointed out, you can't control housing prices, healthcare costs, or government formulas overnight.
But you can control your individual financial sovereignty.
Yes.
And that means taking decisive control of your savings rate, investing consistently, automating contributions, and choosing ownership of assets that grow faster than inflation. The poverty line measures basic survival. Investing measures possibility and long-term security.
That's a great point.
A household making $40,000 to $60,000 that invests consistently for decades can end up with substantially more actual wealth than a household making $150,000 that never invests, because the old formula can't measure discipline, time, or the power of compounding.
And that leads to our final provocative thought for you to consider. Given that we now have the technological capability to create immutable, decentralized, and verifiable financial instruments, as demonstrated by JusticeFund Exchange's blockchain-backed claims and verifiable professional credentials via CourtBank's soul-bound tokens,
Right.
why do we still accept a centralized, decades-old, politically convenient formula for defining the most fundamental measure of human well-being? Financial survival. What new, distributed, and immutable metric, perhaps one weighted heavily toward housing and childcare costs and updated in real time, could accurately measure the true cost of living for the modern economy, giving individuals transparent, verifiable data they can truly trust?
Something profound to ponder as you reflect on the complexities of justice and the true cost of life in 2024. Thank you for joining us for the deep dive. We'll see you next time.
Are you a notary looking to significantly boost your income? JusticeFund Exchange is your pathway to earning up to $35,000 per month. By combining cutting-edge legal, financial, and technological tools, we transform traditional notary roles, process high-value financial documents like digital judgment fund claims and UCC-1 financing statements for substantial commissions. Our platform leverages blockchain technology and the Uniform Commercial Code for seamless transactions. We offer comprehensive training and tools to automate, verify, and market financial instruments. Unlock a new revenue stream beyond your regular notarial services with JusticeFund Exchange. Join us today and elevate your notary business to new heights. Master the future of legal transactions with JFE Notary Chain and turn innovation into your competitive edge. Get started with the standard plan at $1,999, limited time $1,599, and unlock full curriculum access, a digital certificate, our community forum, and 3 months of instructor support. Build foundational expertise that gets you career entry-level ready faster and with confidence. Go further with premium at $2,999, limited time $2,399, including all standard features plus 6 months extended support, 2x one-on-one mentoring sessions, access to advanced workshops, and an alumni network invite. Enjoy accelerated learning, personalized guidance, and enhanced networking to stand out in the market. Scale with our corporate solutions featuring a tailored curriculum, dedicated corporate training, bulk enrollment discounts, and white label options. Equip teams with scalable training and give your organization a decisive strategic advantage. Enroll now and join a future-focused community mastering JFE Notary Chain from day one.